If you take Darwin as an example, I mean, Darwin was brought up in a very theological or religious context, and Nietzsche points out that before releasing or publishing his whole theory of natural selection, he had it for 20 years and he kept it in a cupboard stacked away. I think on Darwin's part, he himself realised that it would have precisely the tremendous consequences, potentially nihilistic ones, that Nietzsche was detecting within the theory, that it would undermine the whole basis of Western morality and metaphysics, that it would show that the world functions and operates quite well, or quite consistently, without the need for any divine intervention.
In 1869, 10 years after Darwin published The Origin of Species, Nietzsche was appointed Professor of Classical Philology at Basel University. He had liberated himself from the confines of Christianity, but now he was searching for something to replace it with. Without divine sanction or retribution, human suffering was unintelligible. Nietzsche looked to philosophy for an answer, and discovered the teachings of the German atheist thinker Arthur Schopenhauer. Here he found the consolation he craved to make sense of a godless universe.
Once Nietzsche recognizes that the benevolent Christian God cannot be believed in any longer, it's natural that Schopenhauer's philosophy should appeal to him. Schopenhauer's philosophy is pessimistic at its very core. It recognizes that human experience is not, for the most part, very pleasant, and that there are certain ways in which we can accommodate ourselves with this truth, with what Nietzsche refers to in his first book, The Birth of Tragedy, the truth of Silenus, that the best thing is not to have been born, but the second best thing is to die quickly.
There was, in Schopenhauer's view, one good way to get out of that misery, if only momentarily, and that was through art. Art had a very important role, and above all, music. So in the musical experience, you could transcend your earthly misery for a few moments.
For Nietzsche, nowhere was Schopenhauer's theory better illustrated than in the music of Richard Wagner. Nietzsche went to see his opera Tristan and Isolde 3 times. He identified with the suffering of the protagonists and found the ecstatic experience of the performance profoundly moving. Wagner became a surrogate father figure for Nietzsche, and he was a frequent visitor at the Wagner's house in Tribschen on Lake Lucerne during the 1870s. In the composer's art, Nietzsche saw the possibility for a renaissance in European culture based on the classical Greek model of tragedy. Nietzsche's book, The Birth of Tragedy, was largely inspired by Wagner and argued that Wagner's music represented a pre-Christian ideal, symbolized by the Greek god Dionysus.
The Dionysian culture was wildly energetic, wildly musical. It was associated for Nietzsche always with dance, just as it was historically. It was associated with inebriation, intoxication, excess, joy, and absolute imperviousness to sadness and pain, tragedy.
Nietzsche sought a philosophical answer to the pain of existence as he became increasingly debilitated by chronic physical ailments. Born with severe myopia, he had always been a sickly child. During the Franco-Prussian War, he contracted dysentery and diphtheria while serving as a medical orderly, and is generally believed to have been infected with syphilis in a brothel while a student. By the age of 30, Nietzsche had become a partial invalid.
Every 2 or 3 weeks, I spend about 36 hours in bed, in real torment. Perhaps I am gradually improving, but this winter is the worst there has been. I keep thinking it is such a strain getting through the day that by evening there is no pleasure left in life, and I really am surprised at how difficult living is.
He refers to himself as being ill. He never refers to what he's ill with, ever. Now this may just have been an effect of the age. We're thinking of the 1880s, where it would be suicidal, I suppose, for some man to write in a book. He wouldn't get it published, perhaps, if he wrote in a book that he was suffering from syphilis. But he describes the symptoms so clearly that it's hard to believe that he didn't realise that his at least male readers of his books would know what he was describing. But it affected his life profoundly, inasmuch as he lived as an invalid for many, many days in each year. And so there were a great many things he couldn't do.
Nietzsche's illness was to become a major turning point in his life, both physically and philosophically. In 1876, at the opening of Wagner's great opera house at Bayreuth, Nietzsche left after the first act of The Ring, suffering from a mysterious illness. His relationship with Wagner was already under serious strain due to Nietzsche's objection to the composer's growing nationalism. Walking out on The Ring was the last straw.
At Bayreuth, Nietzsche felt literally nauseated, and that nausea was both a turning point and a symbol. I mean, it was clearly a physical symptom which was expressive of a psychological state. He couldn't stomach the spuriousness of the enthusiasm, the kind of reverence that Wagner was commanding and reveling in. It sickened him literally. He had to leave. The break with Wagner had become inevitable. You can't say, terribly sorry, maestro, I wasn't feeling well. Wagner was not someone who would forgive something like that.
His health really was deteriorating, and I think he needed a philosophy, his own philosophy, to cope with his life, to cope with his problems. And the Schopenhauer and Wagner way, the momentary way out in music, that wasn't enough for him anymore.
It was during the years of my lowest vitality that I ceased to be a pessimist. The instinct of self-restoration forbade me a philosophy of poverty and discouragement. This, in fact, is how that long period of sickness appears to me now. As it were, I discovered life anew, including myself. I turned my will to health, to life, into a philosophy, into the will to power.
He says somewhere that you yourselves are this will to power. And I think Nietzsche thought that ultimately the task was one of self-mastery, that is, of acquiring a certain kind of self-knowledge that would not be merely intellectual or abstract, because for Nietzsche all knowledge is ultimately rooted in the body. So for him, self-mastery involves acquiring as much knowledge as is possible about the human body, about your body, about its physiology, about its psychology.
He felt that one of the great influences of Christianity was to banish the body from culture. He suggested that perhaps the whole of Western philosophy has been a misunderstanding of the body. And his view was that our physical nature and our psychological nature has ultimate bearing on the way we think. And the phrase the will to power, die Wille zur Macht in German, I think can be read in terms of this idea of self-making. And what we might see as part of his legacy in the 20th century is the institutionalizing of self-making as therapy. And I think that that's a pioneering aspect of his work, and it leads on to Freud. I mean, arguably without Nietzsche, there wouldn't be Freud.
Nietzsche's new philosophy resulted in the publication of Human, All Too Human, subtitled A Book for Free Spirits. Begun in the solitude of the Swiss countryside, it was as much a work of psychology as philosophy. It was Nietzsche's first great statement of individualism and challenged mankind to think for itself. He wrote it in short aphoristic bursts while out walking, a method of working he would continue for the rest of his life.
And so onwards, along a path of wisdom, with a hearty tread, a hearty confidence. However you may be your own source of experience. Throw off your discontent about your nature. Forgive yourself, your own self. You have it in your power to merge everything you have lived through, false starts, errors, delusions, passions, your loves and your hopes, into your goal, with nothing left over.
He had freed himself from the fetters of ancient traditions and of opinions which were not his. And free spirit to him means to be willing and to be able and to dare to have a fresh look out, to question one's own opinions all the time, and to be open-minded enough to find one's own way.
From Human, All Too Human onwards, Nietzsche is effectively sending himself out into the wilderness. He's very aware that the book is a controversial one. He's very aware that by publishing it in 1878, he's going to cut himself off from a lot of the friends that he's had so far. Wagner himself saw the book as evidence already of Nietzsche's mental instability. And Nietzsche therefore found himself increasingly isolated. He's conceiving of himself as a sort of heroic wanderer figure heading out up mountains and into new territory.